Y'all ready for this?
What's up, Bodybuilding.com listeners? My name is Danielle Bitts, and welcome back to the BBCom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Stokes. Kira is a health and wellness expert based in New York City with over 28 years of experience in the fitness industry. A graduate of Boston College with a degree in psychology and a minor in health sciences, Kira's core business is a mix of her award-winning Stokes Fit app, KSFIT Fuel, and KSFIT gear. In addition to running her own seven-figure company, Kira is a celebrity personal trainer. The Stokes method, Kira's science-backed training system, customized client programming, and unwavering attention to form and boundless energy has gained her a passionate, devoted global community of over 500,000 followers. Her partnership portfolio includes Therabody, ProMix, Hyperwear, and Lululemon. Kira has been featured in countless publications including Shape, Women's Health, Self, Vogue, Business Insider, Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. Kira holds multiple certifications such as NASM-CPT, NASM-PES, NASM-WFS, FRCms, pre- and postnatal, and more. Kira, welcome to the pod. That is quite the resume. You had me tongue twisted a little bit because I had to go through so much, but excited to dive in with you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Awesome.
Pun intended.
There you go. As always, we've got some new and fascinating topics queued up for you guys today. We'll be breaking down Kira's infamous Stokes method in just 1 second. We'll be defining hybrid training and how it can greatly benefit all fitness goals, and we'll be tackling a topic that almost everyone out there wants to learn more about, which is core building 101. I also have to tease a really great and interesting discussion we have planned towards the back half, which will be centered around training in the menopause and post-menopause era. So Kira, let's get started with the 4 F's and breaking down the Stokes method. Today's episode is brought to you by Codage, a nutritional and supplement wellness brand. Codage is your go-to wellness brand dedicated to supporting your busy lifestyle with a wide range of cutting-edge nutritional solutions and innovative dietary supplement formulas. From multi-collagen solutions to essential vitamins and minerals, along with probiotics, Codage has it all. Their premium collagen selections, always non-GMO, are designed to seamlessly integrate into your daily routine, providing the essential support your body needs, including 5 types of collagen. Codage is redefining the way we nourish our bodies and expands beyond nutrition into the realm of beauty care, offering comprehensive, holistic wellness solutions. Embrace your health and well-being today with Codage. Shop the collection now at Bodybuilding.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Yeah, so the Stokes method, it's interesting how, as a trainer and group fitness coach, how things evolve over time. And you hear method a lot in fitness, that different trainers or different coaches have a method. And I can truly say that I didn't have a defined method until about almost 15 years into my career, because I truly believe that in order to call something a method, it has to be tested and proven. And you have to have had the experience and hands-on experience with actual humans, not just, I'm a firm believer that just virtual, right, is really tough. You need to really have had one-on-one experience with people to know how your quote method truly works and how it evolves over time. So I don't take the word method lightly when I say the Stokes method. It is something that has really evolved and continues to evolve over time based on my experience in education and continuing education. I always say, always be a student. But, and that's the beautiful thing about it. It's not stagnant. It's ever changing. So the Stokes method is really, it's a science-backed functional flow of movement formula. That's the one-liner that you get about the Stokes method. But there are so many different pillars within the method and different offerings now, as they are shown on the Kira Stokes Fit app. Everybody has access to them now, that really do reinforce, as we'll talk about later, hybrid training.
So let's break down those 4 F's, right, that go into the Stokes method. Those are form, function, fatigue, and fuel. Tell us what they mean and how they play into fitness goals.
So the first F is, to me, the most important F, and that is form. And proper form and being able to articulate proper form is really one of the things that has made my name in the industry, I believe, and that it's not just me having, proper form. And when you follow me on Instagram or you do my app, I do get those comments like, wow, your form is perfect. Well, in my mind, it better be if I'm the one, trying to get the information out there. But most importantly, to those people that are taking the information in, to feel 100% confident in what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the purpose of every movement is so incredibly important in order for that movement to have the impact that it should have on your body. So to me, if you're not performing a movement properly, there really isn't any point in doing it, right? And as a coach and a trainer, you have to be able to verbalize. And what I found through developing the app, my virtual platform, which, it'll be 5 years in March, the experience that I had one-on-one, non-virtual, was so instrumental in being able to, as I say, articulate proper form cues. Because if you haven't done it yourself and you haven't experienced coaching that with someone, it's very difficult to be able to speak in layman's terms too, right? Like I can be as scientific as you want, but that doesn't matter to the person that's sitting on their couch just trying to get off it for the first time, right? Like you can say glute medius, glute mat, like all these terms, but it's easier for them to understand side booty when you say glute medius. So, it's having those, it's being able to weave in the more science, anatomy talk, but also those little moments or the unforgettable cues that really make the difference. Like when I say, squeeze your glutes like you have a check for $1 million in between them and you have to hold it there. That sticks in someone's head. If I just said, squeeze your glutes, make sure you're engaging both the medius, the maximus, like,
you've lost
over
them.
Someone's head.
Right.
So form, it's not just like having it, but being able to articulate it.
And you mentioned impact too. I mean, you do a repetitive exercise over a number of years and you're doing it correctly. You're going to see the growth and the positive impact you're going to want.
Yeah.
On the contrary, if you're doing it incorrectly, it's going to be quite a negative impact. You're going to set yourself up for injury. You're going to set yourself up for a lot of other things that you don't want happening.
I think it's amazing what I hear so often is, oh my gosh, I've been squatting for 10 years, but I just squatted for the first time yesterday, really, because they truly listened and connected to the cues that I was giving them. And that makes me feel amazing. It also makes me really sad because it is a problem in the industry, right? It is a problem that you find a lot of rep counters and you find a lot of people that are just yelling and kind of in it for their own workout. And you have to be in this industry. I mean, I've been in this industry for 28 years. For the right reasons. And the right reason is to help others to be their absolute best. And that should be the goal with your word choice, is that you are trying to ensure that people feel safe, that what they're doing is effective, and that it's going to have the most positive impact on their body. So, like I said, it's amazing in one sense, but then it's like, oh my gosh, like
I know. And listen, and form is what's going to really make the differentiating factor between understanding mind-muscle connection too.
Absolutely.
And once you figure that out, to me personally, it's game over, right? Everything starts to make sense. You start to understand what activating your glutes actually means.
Yeah.
You actually understand all those years of a yoga or Pilates instructor telling you to engage your core. You're like, no, I actually get it now, right?
Exactly. It has to be explained. It doesn't come innately. All of these things, when you say, we throw these terms around, and I think sometimes it can also sometimes work against you having been in the industry for so long, because you forget that you might have someone in the room or someone pushing play for the first time that has never heard this, because in your mind you're like, I've said this cue, or I've had this moment 10,000 times in my career. Do I really need to say it again? Or when I would teach a class and you see 90% of the people that have taken your class 200 times, but then there are those 3 people who have never set foot in that studio, and you have to teach to both groups. And you just have to remember that both people, those that are super advanced and those that are new, everyone's going to take something away from that. You say something a little bit different every single time you coach as a coach, and that has an impact on someone. So first and foremost, as you just spoke to, mind-muscle connection is everything. There's going through a movement, and then there's connecting, feeling, and truly engaging with the movement. It's 2 completely different things, because you can pass through a movement and feel absolutely nothing. You're thinking about your laundry or what you have to do that night or what everything else is going on. but your complete focus while you're performing movement should be on that movement.
Right. 50 mindless reps versus 5 very, very acutely aware reps. It's going to make a ton of difference.
Yes.
Let's move into the second one. That's function. Explain what function means.
So function, when I came up with these 4 pillars of the Stokes method, function means functional training, making sure that the way that you train presents itself in real life in some way. Because really what we're doing when we train, what we should be thinking about is longevity. We should be thinking about we have the long game in mind. Sure, when I was in my 20s, I was like everybody, let's be honest, you're training to look good too. People are fully, if they're like, oh, I just want to be able to, walk or pick up my grandchildren when I'm 90, right? People aren't thinking of that when they're 20, right?
Absolutely.
You want to look good, you want to feel good. Absolutely. But all of the movements that we do apply to real life in some respect, right? So when you're training, you want to make sure that you train in all planes of motion, right? So your frontal plane, the sagittal plane, the transverse plane. And when you think about it, so many people train front to back, sagittal plane. So they're training forward, back. You're lunging, whether we're walking, we're running. That's all those things take place in the sagittal plane. But when you go to open a car door, when you have your groceries, that's the transverse plane. You're rotating, right? So when you do a rotational med ball twist or a rotational slam, that's transverse plane, right? That's training you for when you have those moments where you're quickly turning to open the car door, or you're grabbing your kid as you turn, like they're about to cross the street. Something happens, right? So always thinking in terms of not every single movement you do, you're gonna be like, oh, I can apply this to real life in this way. But in general, making sure that the function of a movement has more to do than just lifting a weight, picking up, putting it down, that you're thinking when the next time, you see all those videos, we see them on Instagram, right? If a trainer, if a trainer walked through life and it's them the grocery store, they're doing a deadlift to pick up but it's true,
a package of water bottles.
Yeah,
right.
It's that is truly how my mind thinks. I get sent those all the time and I'm like, oh, I can't make one of these because it's already been done. It's been done. But
right.
That is how I think, right? You go to your freezer today, you go to open the freezer, you squat to open it up, you do all these things, because the end goal is to be able to, and you see it as your parents, when you look at your parents when you're getting older and your parents are getting older and you see them, want to be able to, as I said, pick up their grandkids or just get out of a chair properly, because these things, as not to get, it's not to be a depressing conversation, but it's you go through this point in life where you start when you're young, right? And what are you doing? You're doing nothing when you're first born, right? You're just kind of laying there and figuring out
wobbling
your limbs,
around.
right? But then you start to move in all planes of motion, right? And then you start to play different sports, and then you start to focus on one sport, maybe, right? So you start to really hone in on maybe one or two planes of motion during that sport, which isn't great. We go through these phases where all of a sudden then you're out of sport. And what do you start doing? Things start going down the back end, right? Because you start training one-dimensionally. And then eventually, when you're 70s, 80s, or 90s, you're back to sitting too much, right? Which is, I always say that's starting to happen to us in our 40s and 50s now, is that sitting is the new smoking, right? It's we are sitting more than we're moving these days, right? And it should be the complete opposite. We shouldn't be having to take a break from sitting to move. We should be taking a break from move. You should need to take a break from moving so much that you have to sit.
Couldn't agree more.
And that's, we've got it all mixed up now, and we need to try to really change that. And so the functional F means, functional training, yes, but it's also man, motion is lotion. Keep moving that body, right?
Absolutely. Let's talk about fatigue.
So fatigue, there's two different ways to think of this particular F. Fatigue in that you want to challenge your body to a point where you're reaching muscle fatigue, right? That's where the growth gap happens. Because what are we doing when we're really strength training or we're going for a run? You are challenging your body, or when you're strength training and it sounds awful to say, but we are tearing muscle fibers, right? That's how we build them up to become stronger. So reaching that point of fatigue during your strength training program is important. Same when you cardiovascular fitness, like zone 2. Yes, we're never going to really reach that point of fatigue most likely in zone 2 when we're hanging out there. We need that for sure. We need zone 2. But you're taking a HIIT class or you're doing sprints or something more explosive, your goal is to reach that point of fatigue, right? To work on the integrity of the muscle. But fatigue also, it's counterintuitive. It's like, I'm talking about proper sleep. So when you hit that point of fatigue and you've really challenged your body, sleep is so incredibly important.
Which is also going to help repair those muscles that you just spent a couple hours tearing apart.
Exactly. And truth be told, when I first got into this industry, nobody really focused on sleep. Like, it was not a topic like it is today. Like, you didn't stress as much about your sleep as your workout. Like, we have all of these different forms of technology to tell us, like, go to bed, or you slept this much, or you're not going to perform as well today because you didn't sleep as well. You know, it is such a huge focus these days, and which I think is amazing. But I also think you don't want to focus on it so much that, as I said, that you get stressed about it, because then you're not going to fall asleep. Like, if you're so worried about getting your 8 hours, you're probably going to lay there thinking about it for an hour of that, right? So
the shift that I really love that I'm starting to notice too, I feel like we used to have like a lot of 5 a.m. warriors, right? And even for me, I was a college athlete. It was 6 a.m. You were in the locker room at 5:15. You were actually physically lifting by 6 a.m. That was not optimal for me. I did not lift my best at that point. I got injured when I was putting my body through that early in the morning. I have found out that I love to live in like that late morning spot. Yep. And that's going to be different for everybody, trying to understand how much sleep you need, what time of day your body wants to move. Maybe you want to do cardio in the morning and strength at night. So I really love that we're starting to see people take accountability for owning what feels best in their body. Yeah,
I think what I've always been a huge advocate of is, like, when someone says, well, what's the best time of day for me to be working out? Or and it's like, I'm always that person that's like, it's not black or white. It's always gray. And I'm always like, what's the best, like, when do you feel your best?
Right.
And they're like my husband, for example, is a night owl. That man is never going to work out in the morning, ever, ever, ever. 9 o'clock at night is when he, like, literally gets up, goes downstairs, and it's like, I've had so many conversations with different, naturopathic doctors who are like, no, like, that's going to spike his cortisol level, like, right before he goes to, and I'm like, but that's how his body works. That's when his body works best. So, his levels are probably different than most people's levels. And I think, like, the best time of day to work out is when you're actually going to do it. Like, I think we need to stop saying, like, oh, first thing in the morning, like, that's when you've got to get it done, because it puts a lot of pressure on people who, like you said, that just wasn't the best time for you. That wasn't your sweet spot. Someone like me who trains clients, right? Luckily now I don't have those early morning hours anymore. Like, I put a kibosh on, like, the 6 a.m. client, but I am religiously training people from 8 until noon. My time to work out is like noon to 2, whatever that is. And sure, I'd love to work out at 8, but it's not possible with my job. So I think that it can be really discouraging to people, especially if you're just trying to get into fitness, when you hear, oh, you've got to do it first thing in the morning, that's it, and then people go, well, I can't, so I guess I just won't do anything.
Right. Let's just focus and let's just get moved. Let's just start moving, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Last one, fuel.
Yeah, fuel.
Can't do it without fuel.
No, you can't do it without fuel. And I've always I don't love the word diet. Like, I've never, it has the word die in it. Like, I don't love the word diet. I've never subscribed to diet culture. My fueling program is called KSFIT FUEL. And I always refer to, the nutrition that we're putting on our body as fuel, because we are like a car. We are the engine of a car. You don't run on empty, right? Your car won't go. You got to fill it up. So how you fuel your body, it just has such a massive impact on your performance. And again, there are certain things that, yes, we all need in our fueling program, but it is so personal. It is so, like, everybody's likes, dislikes, possible allergies. There's so many factors that go into what makes a fueling program right for a certain person. So I think the number one question I've gotten over all of my years, right, is what do you eat? Like, more so than how I work out. Like, it's crazy, like, because people don't necessarily, what I found over all these years, they don't really want to do the work of the workout, but they're like, if I could just change my diet to be what she's eating, maybe that'll work. It doesn't work like that, right? Because how I feel, and like when I tell people on our KSFIT Fuel, our live Zooms, what I eat in a day, their mouth drops. They're just like, there's no way that's going in that body. I'm like, how do you think I'm able to do what I do?
Right.
I have always been the queen snacker. I'm like, every 2 hours I'm putting something in my body. I have to, or I wilt like a flower. And I've never been a big meal person. So it's like 8 small meals. That's the way my metabolism stays revved. It stays going. It's always worked for me. I think you have to take a look at it's calories in, it's calories out. It's how many, what are you doing activity wise to support how you fuel, and how do you fuel to support that activity? So obviously that's as important as the actual workout itself. But I think people need to stop looking at what others are doing. Like what I cannot stand is these videos, what I eat in a day. Mm-hmm. That doesn't apply to anybody else.
Not applicable to the masses.
It's not applicable to the masses. And
right.
so, when I started this fueling program, first of all, I partnered with a registered dietitian, because I'm not a registered dietitian, and I firmly believe, stay in your lane. Of course, I know a lot about nutrition, but when it's something as big as an issue as this is, you need to make sure you have the right authority that you're working with. 3 different programs: Stokes, Super Stokes, Super Duper, based on your activity level.
Yep.
Based on your likes and dislikes.
I think you nailed it, right? Intuitive. It just comes down to intuitive eating.
Yeah.
Right. And I also think you have to understand that in different periods of your life, you're going to change. I'll use myself an example. Yeah. Right now, my body really loves breakfast, and it really loves fueling before my workouts. There was a certain time in my life where it didn't even want food until 10, 11 a.m. And that's you have to listen to your body, the way that you move, the way that you fuel, and just understand that could look different in a year from now, but you just have to understand what your body's itching for.
I love that you call it intuitive eating is like 100% what I'm on board with. And I also this might be kind of controversial, but when people like intermittent fasting, I don't know, to me, like intermittent fasting is like if you stop eating at 9 at night and you just don't eat and get to,
right.
It's just
you did it.
Called, like you slept and you didn't eat while you were sleeping. Like I'm like, so, but also like, again, that works for some people to have like that a certain window. Like I know myself, I have to eat right when I get up in the morning, or I get nauseous. Yep. Like I'll have my coffee, obviously, water before coffee, always 12 ounces of water first, because you got to start with hydration is really important, then coffee. But if I don't eat something within like 20 minutes of having my coffee, I know what happens with my blood sugar level and how I feel. And some people are like, oh, I don't eat for 4 hours after. I'm like, I can't imagine that.
Right.
I can't imagine that.
Right.
So
everybody's different.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something you and I spoke on before today as well. We're seeing 2 words float around the fitness industry right now. They're screaming it from the rooftops, and that's lift heavy. And yes, I think that both of us know the benefits of lifting heavy for body composition and overall strength. But how do you view cardio as an equal balancer here, leaving room for both? Again, for any fitness goal, there has to be room for both.
There has to be room for both. I have so much to say on this subject. and oh gosh, I don't even know where to start. Strength training is incredibly important at every age. It doesn't matter how old you are. You need to challenge your muscles with strength training. You need to, in order for body composition, for bone density, for lean muscle mass, for all of it. I've always been an advocate of that. Now, those words mean, the problem with screaming those words from the rooftop to me is that, again, it's so individual. If you are hearing lift heavy and you're someone that is brand new to fitness, and usually people or individuals who are brand new to fitness they're looking for any information, like they're soaking in everything that they hear, and they're really taking it to heart, like without maybe the proper due diligence on what that means. So when you hear lift heavy and you're brand new to fitness, and then maybe you try to walk in the gym, or you buy yourself dumbbells, and and it might sound silly, but it happens. You buy 20 pounds, right? And you go to use a 20-pound dumbbell, and what happens? You get hurt. You get frustrated because it's too much for you. You can't lift it, but you're hearing you've got to lift heavy. So what happens? You end up doing nothing. You sit on the couch and you're like, I got hurt. I'm not doing that again. Strength training is not for me. It didn't work for my body. It's not that it didn't work for your body. It's that you didn't start you didn't start the progression properly. So I think we need to be really careful when we say lift heavy. And you would think everybody knows that, but it's not necessarily true. Like, you really do have to spell these things out. There is a proper progression to getting to the point where you can lift heavy. And it can start with body weight work, learning the proper form with your body weight, which is very functional because we deal with our body weight on a daily basis, right?
If you can't move the body weight around, you're not going to get through life.
Exactly. Like, you can't, truthfully, it is the best tool you have, and it's always with you. It's always with you. And then you incorporate some band work. And I feel like you and I talked about this a bit too, that, there are band bashers out there. And I'm not like, this could be a whole podcast on its own. I think we're doing such a disservice when you tell people, like, cut up your bands. Like, there's no point in doing it. You're better off sitting on the couch. Well, what's the first thing someone hands you when you go to physical therapy? Or, God forbid, if you have an injury, you're going to physical therapy, or you're using physical therapy as prehab, right? A way to stay out of injury. They hand you a band, and they teach you, they first will show you how to do a movement with your body weight. Then they give you a band to apply a little bit of resistance so you get used to working with resistance. Bands are a wonderful tool for activation, for education, for a finisher, and they can even enhance your workout when you're doing resistance training. So you add a band to a dumbbell, and you've just increased the impact of that work. Say you're doing a bicep curl and you've got a supersized Stokes band attached to it. You're so focused on both the concentric, you have to be focused on the concentric and eccentric contraction, right? So I think we need to, that's one subject, like, stop poo-pooing bands, just know where they should be used, right? Do you want to just use bands for your entire life as your workout? Well, no, of course not. Do you want to only use dumbbells? No. Do you want to only use barbells? No. Like, a little bit of everything is the way to go, right? You've got to, learning all these different tools is fantastic. They're another tool in your toolbox, and your toolbox should have many tools. As far as lifting heavy, yes, you need to challenge your muscles by lifting heavy. Absolutely. You need to get to the point where you have when you have 3 or 4 reps left, where you are feeling like, holy cow, I'm compromising my form, right? That's how you know, did I pick the right weight? You've got great form. Say you're doing 10 reps. You've got great form for the first 6, maybe 7. The final 3, you watch yourself and you go, wow, I'm struggling here. That's good. That means you're challenged. And the great news is you could always, if it's too much, decrease your weight. What I also see is very dangerous when we say lift heavy is that it's discounting the importance of cardiovascular training, as you spoke to. Your heart is a muscle, right? And your heart needs and deserves to be challenged, just like your biceps, your triceps, your quads, your hamstrings, all the things. So I think it's important that, yes, we encourage strength training. We encourage picking up heavier weights and being challenged and not always grabbing, 2-3 pound dumbbells, which also have their place. And I can talk about that later as well. But don't forget about your heart, and that, people will argue, well, if you're lifting heavy, your heart rate's going up. It's not going up to 80% of your max. It's just not, unless you're doing like a crazy power lift, a power lift where, like, red-faced, whatever, like that's...
And it's also not giving you the same effects as, say, a zone 2 workout. You're not staying right here, my hand's going pretty straight across the board here. Right. You're not sitting at like that 120 throughout the entire duration of a weightlifting session. Right. Exactly. So, and that brings up the point of, like, zone 2 cardio versus sprinting, right? There's so much research. I know for myself, I take my calls and I take my anything that I can that I cannot, I'm not going to sound like I'm huffing and puffing. I do it from an elliptical because I'd rather be doing that than sitting here. Like, killing me, I'm sitting here on this podcast, like, my butt already hurts, Danielle, from sitting. It's like, I want to get up and move, right? If we could talk and walk, we would do this. Maybe that's an idea. Maybe we'll have to start doing these, like, man on the street style podcasts.
Oh my gosh, amazing. But, I think people are getting very confused, and they're not doing the cardiovascular training that their heart needs because they're only focused now on hearing lifting heavy. Or you go to the gym and you see, oh my gosh, like the treadmill, right? Everybody's walking at a 15.0 on the treadmill. It's the, the hot girl walk or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, like, that's one way to do cardio, but, like, mix it up.
It doesn't have to be daunting.
No,
Right.
It's not like, and you also don't have to do what's popular, right? You need to do what's right. And so whatever is going to get you, and again, it's that like, whatever is going to get you moving and challenging you to the point where you're feeling like what, like it's a good feeling when you're doing cardio and your heart is pumping and you're like, wow, like what releases that, and there's controversy over whether endorphins really are something that are released when you're, when you're running or what, but nobody can tell me that when you go for a run, right, and you sprint and then you slow down, that you don't feel like this rush, right, of like, wow, your heart's pumping and the blood's flowing. It's doing amazing things for your body. And it's also, stimulating different kinds of muscle growth, right? So lift heavy, but don't forget about like the most important muscle you have, which is your heart.
Absolutely. And that could be playing basketball. Maybe it is walking on an incline for you. That works for you. Awesome. It can be playing pickup games. It can be, doing a HIIT class, whatever it is, whatever makes you happy to do it. I think you nailed it earlier. Whatever you enjoy doing, just do that.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, I think we're getting to, and I know that like, it's what I guess gets more PR, or it's the buzzwords in the media, right? When you state an absolute, it's what draws attention. But you're never going to hear me doing that, because I'm such a firm believer that if you don't like what you're doing, if you don't enjoy it to some capacity, you're never going to continue doing it. So although, and this is a great, I know we're talking later about how to help beginners like get started, but one of the things I'm always saying to people when they're new to fitness is you first need to like take a moment and think about what really resonates with you. Like, what do you enjoy? Is it dancing? Is it walking? Is it roller skating? Whatever it is, make sure you start with that. Like, that's the thing that's going to get you off the couch and get you out the door, the thing that you love to do.
I think this conversation lends itself well into topic 2 for today, which is really defining hybrid training and the benefits. And I think we can break this out into 2 different parts here. I think hybrid training can mean a couple of different things, especially in a post-COVID world. Right now, we're seeing this new hybrid fitness model where people are doing a lot from their homes. They're understanding, hey, I can be successful and I can reach my goals right from my living room. We've seen, obviously, the sales of some of our favorite bikes go up quite a bit, right? They're understanding that, things can get accomplished at home. However, thankfully, we've also seen them immerse themselves back into gyms. They miss the community factor. They miss sweating with people and accomplishing their goals with people. So let's talk about hybrid training in terms of the work from home model. And then in a second, we're going to get into hybrid training in terms of the actual programming, which is what we just spent a couple of minutes talking about. When somebody says, I'm a hybrid athlete, we'll talk about what that actually means, and with the rise of things like High Rocks and DECA and things of that nature. So, but first, let's talk about that work from home or that sweat from home model that we're seeing now and the mix between the two.
Yeah. So working out from home was relatively new to me. Like I'm a gym girl, since I was 18. So trying at that point, I also during COVID, started working out from home, and that was it. Or I guess people will say, I've worked out in my driveway for many, many years because I'm an outdoor person as well. So I bring all equipment out into the driveway. But I think what the benefit, like if we can think of something positive that came out of COVID, is that it really did convince a lot of people that you can get a good workout in anywhere, right? That you can't use the excuse that, I can't get to the gym, forget it. It's too hard. I have kids. Life is too busy. I can't get there. You can get just as incredible a workout at home, depending on the platform you're using, as you can in the gym. The biggest challenge with it is the distractions around you, right? So, or the ability, people can turn Kira off really easily. They can just pause me. If they're in a gym, if they're in a class, in a group setting, in a gym, you're probably not going to walk out the door halfway through the class. Sure. So, there are benefits and there are some, some negatives to it as well. But what we're seeing now, which I think is great, or what I'm seeing a lot with my app, is that people are taking their iPad or whatnot to the gym and finding a Group X room that's empty and using that room to continue to do the program that they love to do, right? Or incorporating it with, heavier strength training days where they're in the gym on the strength training floor, right? Doing that work on certain days, and then work from home using an app on the days where they're home. But I think it's also reinforced what I always like to, I'm such an advocate of these, movement snacks, as I call them, or Stokes snacks, where, working and moving from home, the beauty of it is you can take 10 minutes, right? Where we're sitting right now. The minute we finish this podcast, Danielle, I'd say get up, push play on some fine tuning 10 minutes, or postural reset from the Body Shop, because we just sat for too long, right? So you can have these bite-sized snacks during the day that I like to say they all add up in your wellness bank. So when you have, and in some ways better, right? That you have these little moments where you can get some movement in and step away from your computer. And, the most important thing that people can do when they are working from home is to not get off a call and immediately grab their phone and just start scrolling like this and looking at Instagram, but rather get up immediately, get outside, get some natural light, get out in, nature. And I always I have my bands here for you, but bring a band with you. You can have it around your wrist, and you're just doing some postural, you just start pressing out on the band, or you start flexing, working your triceps. It gives us the ability to get these snacks in that long term can make a massive difference on your body. So it's made a shift of I've got to be in the gym for 2 hours to get done what I need to get to. I'm going to break it up into 3 different little bite-sized movement snacks.
Absolutely. When I started seeing people bicep curling laundry detergent, I was like, oh, we got it now. We are cracking the code. We're going to be just fine, everybody.
Your whole house could be a gym. You just
Absolutely.
have doing push-ups off your countertop in the kitchen.
Yep.
It's you have to shift your mindset, right? And people think it's silly. They're or they'll say, just give it a rest. It's no, this isn't how every second of the day is, but if you pass by a countertop and you're all of a sudden you're gosh, I could use 10 push-ups, do your 10 push-ups against the countertop and then continue on to the refrigerator.
And like you said, those snack bite pieces throughout the day, you do a couple sets of that throughout the day. Okay, you're done.
Exactly.
That's it.
If you do 5 sets of 10 push-ups every time you walk past a counter, you're there's 50 push-ups
I did
in the
50
course of the
push-ups
day,
today, right?
It's 50 better than if you hadn't. So
and then you're going to physically feel better, and then also mentally you're hey, I did 50 push-ups today. All right, I'm going to go for 55 tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I'll often say to people who are they struggle with hitting the refrigerator at night, right? It's just they're oh my gosh, it's I used to tell them turn the kitchen light off after 9 or whatever, you're not the kitchen's closed. But that's hard for a lot of people. You still pass through your kitchen, right? So if you instead, before you go to the cabinet, just do push-ups off the counter, or just a couple, something on your way there that can maybe distract you, and then suddenly you realize, wow, I wasn't hungry. I was just doing this because I was bored.
I needed some stimulation.
Right.
I think also, you touched on it. I mean, people are bringing the phones and the tablets into the gym, and there's a reason for that. I experienced this yesterday. I hardly go into an actual gym on a Sunday. I like it to be a family and low-key day. Yeah. But I said, I really want to move, but I don't feel motivated to do it here. So I went to the gym. And I think a lot of us didn't realize how much we were missing that component during COVID, right?
Yeah.
Just being around other people, even if you're not necessarily working out with them for a class, just being around that many people and understanding that they're all there working, it's motivating.
It's
you
totally
get to
motivating.
that mat and you're doing your pre-work and you're okay, I'm ready to go. And then it takes it up a level when you go into a class. You leave one of those classes and you're wow, I'm so glad I came today. So I think a lot of people are emerging themselves back into the community factor, and we're seeing experiential events come back. We're seeing more smaller boutiques come to rise with these kind of classes. We're seeing these type of apps bring people together for in real life events. So it's really awesome to see.
I mean, that's what I miss most. I mean, as someone who has taught group fitness or trained people for, 28 years, when COVID happened, I always said, I want to be able to choose when I hang up my sneakers. I didn't want it to end that way. You know what I mean? It's you get a high off of teaching other people. At least I do. People used to say to me after 28 years, aren't you tired of it? I'm no, I love it so much, but balancing it out, not teaching 15 classes a week anymore, but I was teaching 6, which was perfect. Right. So as to have that taken away so abruptly was as hard for me as it was for the people that used to attend my class. So what I'm now doing is these events, these pop-ups, these like, I did a stoked up for the holidays I just did last month, like these little pop-ups and it's amazing how hungry people are just to be amongst other humans again and have that real, as you said, that community feel. But trust when I say it's not just the people taking the class, like I need it. Like if this is what you were meant to do and born to do, and it's truly your passion, there is nothing more exciting and nothing that fills your soul more than being able to share what you do and make other people feel better. So I think it's awesome. Like in-person events are like my number one goal for the next few years, is to just make sure that I do as many of those as possible, because you just bring people together, and it just really does. It's the motivation and the inspiration it creates just being around others is so huge that can't be duplicated virtually. Like I do my best, and I know I do on the app to keep the energy high and keep people. And I have the most wonderful community and Facebook group. They are so supportive of one another, but there is nothing like then having an in-person event where they get to actually meet one another, So I think if anybody is scared to go to the gym, I think sometimes people got out of the habit. There are those people that are now kind of afraid to go back, right? Because if you're more of an introvert and you got really used to also working out at home, you're like, I'm just going to stay in this like cozy, happy place for a while. I think it's even more important for you to step foot into a gym. And like I said, bring your app with you, or, find a class or something. But it is really important to make sure we do so much in life now with technology that is so introverted, that try to also go to a gym. And one thing if you're using an app, but it's another thing if you're just sitting on equipment and staring at your phone in between sets. Try not to do that.
Right. I mean, especially for introverts, I would argue jump into a class. I mean,
Absolutely.
There's no phone. Believe me, they're not going to be looking at you, because if it's a good class, they're going to be focused on getting through that
Truthfully,
class.
That's a good point. Is that like people aren't looking at you? May think people are looking at you. They're not. First of all, everybody's vain. Everybody's looking at themselves in that mirror. They're not looking at you. Like trust me. Like it's go. And if you go, like fine, go. If you're only comfortable being in the back corner, go in the back corner. Right. Like totally fine. But like I think you'll be amazed at how inspired you are just by being, like we said, being in a room with other people. I as long as I've been a trainer, I still take class twice a week. Like since I started going back to the gym, I take it's a bar class. It's because my Stoked Athletic curriculum is based on bar, and it's like people will look at me sometimes like, why are you taking a class? It's like I freaking love it. Right. It's like the camaraderie and just it feels good to have somebody else tell you what to do.
I was going to say there is a mindless component to it. It allows you to just zone out and just get the work done too.
Yep.
And I think again back to that introvert piece. If it's a great way to meet people, and you're going to have to play around, especially if you're at a new gym and you go to a Tuesday 6 p.m. You're like, I don't think that was my crowd. Go to Thursday at 12 p.m. if your schedule allows, and find your people. You'll find someone eventually, and you'll find people to maybe hit weights with after or work out with at a separate time.
Yep.
Let's segue into the actual definition. Now, there's no hard definition here. There really isn't in our field. But hybrid training, we're seeing, like I said, these events are popping up now. People are actively training to be a hybrid athlete. Yeah. It's almost like a bragging point now. It used to be, I'm an ultra endurance racer. I'm a power lifter or bodybuilder. Now I'm a hybrid athlete. Yeah. What does that mean, Kira?
Yeah. I mean, I define hybrid among my method as, that's kind of. And maybe it was unconsciously what my method became a little subconscious, but also became deliberate once I realized what I was doing. But, within the Stoked method, there's the Stoked Shred series, there's the Stoked Strength series, there's Stoked Athletic Core. They're very pinpointed, I call them anchor offerings on the app. And they really are working to create a hybrid athlete, because you've got one where you're really focused on heavier strength training, Stoked Strength 360. You've got Stoked Shred 360, which is Stoked style HIIT, right? So you're not going quite as heavy, but you've got those amazing intervals of explosiveness. You've got Athletic Core, which is Pilates bar, because you need that in order to stay healthy and strong to be able to do the Stoked Strength 360 and the Shred 360. Excuse me. So when we talk about a hybrid, it's basically making sure that you're well-rounded. So hybrid training is kind of being, instead of like a master of one, right? You're almost a master of none, but you're proficient in all, I guess is the way to define it. You know, it's like, it's almost like an ultra cross training athlete, right? And I think it's almost like, you know, with an Ironman, you're definitely an endurance athlete if you're an Ironman, but you're biking, you're running, and you're swimming. So that's one form of hybrid, because you've got 3 different modalities there. But real hybrid is making sure you incorporate that strength training, and you incorporate the fine tuning and the calisthenics and the conditioning, all of it, right? So finding a modality or a method that gives you all of that, like the Stokes method. hint, little jab there, is really, really important. But it's also because it creates wonderful symmetry in your body. And the ultimate goal is to be as symmetrical as possible. It prevents injury. It's wonderful for muscle growth and the integrity of your muscle to be training it in different ways. It aims toward longevity. And it's also exciting, right? You don't get bored. If you are just constantly, I mean, if you go in the gym every day and you're just lifting, sure, like you get your lift in, but it might get a little boring over time. But ensuring that you then there's some HIIT work in there, and then there's some really hardcore conditioning, jumping rope, whatever it may be, and then the fine tuning aspect that keeps you healthier, the mobility work, right? All of it is so important.
And it's going to help with your body aesthetic goals. You're going to look better than you probably did before. And it's also going to play into the longevity goal that we spoke on earlier, right? Keeping your body, I don't want to say in that guessing state, but keeping your body on its toes, right? Not getting too reliant on the same, 4 or 5 lifts that you're doing every week, and then just walking on a treadmill. Like, move your body, as you said earlier in the episode, in new and unique ways that can be applicable to life.
It's funny. I've changed my terminology, and you're like, you're allowed to do this as you learn more over life. But I used to say, one of my taglines was "shock it to rock it."
I love it.
It's embarrassing. Like when I first, figured out the Stokes method. And it's not that I hate that now, but at the same time, it's not all about, the shock it to rock it. It was like muscle confusion, right? It was like the premise of muscle confusion. And I agree with that to some respect, but I think there needs to be a balance there, right? So you need to keep your body guessing, right? Which hybrid training does that. But within that, you also have to have consistency in your program as well. So the consistency is how you can see how you're getting stronger and the benefits of the hybrid training, right? So you're always gonna, and I've talked about this a bit, but there are certain movements or patterns that you're always gonna do, right? You're always gonna find in programs that you have squats, you have deadlifts, you have lunges, you have a push, you have a pull, you have all of those things. Those basic fundamental movements are where you're going to be able to see, I increased that by 10 pounds. Or, my lift, I feel stronger. I feel better. I've added more weight. I'm definitely getting stronger. It's the work around that you can change to make it more exciting and constantly evolving. You can take your anchor strength moves, always have them in there, but make sure you have variety around those moves, proper variety, that you're moving the body in a way that makes sense with the anchor move.
Right. And obviously, a lot's going to be dependent on your goal too. If you are going out for your first triathlon, you're going to have a really dialed in program. You're going to have to do the same things on the same day every week, but at the same time, when it comes to your strength training, your HIIT training, etc., those kind of not accessory days, but those complementary days to the swim, bike, run, right? That's where we can add these sort of components in. But when you zoom out for a second, yes, look at your skeleton of your program over a 7-day week. Let's say, I want to factor in, maybe you need 2 rest days because this program is so intense. That's okay. Factor those in first. Look at how much volume you need to get in for your swim, your bike, and your run. And then, of course, you have to keep strength in order to, 1, stay strong, and then 2, prevent injury to even get to that starting line, right? So first steps first, just look at that 7-day window, understand plan where I need to pepper in some rest days, how many days a week I need to do more of that volume-based training, and how many days a week I need to do strength. And then you start kind of, plotting those, in there.
Exactly. One of the worst things I've heard, or that I see, like I and I've gotten comments like this on a post, and then I'll actually DM the person and be like, no, where they'll say, oh, I'm taking a pause from your app because I'm going to be running a race.
Now is the time.
And literally, I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and I'll literally DM them and be like, this is when you need it more.
Right.
I'm like, trust me. Like, do not just throw all your strength training aside and all the other work you're doing to just run. It's the worst thing you can do.
Right.
It's like you're never going to be able to actually run the race.
Right. Well, and you're sticking yourself in that sagittal plane. As you said, you're just training that linear movement. You have to ensure that you're getting in that lateral movement to prevent injury. And just, again, keep, 360 degrees. You need your muscles working.
100%. Yes.
Let's talk about the core specifically. This one, I argued with myself about putting this one up front because everybody wants to know more about building a core. So core building 101, you know, Kira, it's no question that you're the core queen. So I want, again, same thing. I want to break it down to two different areas. There's the functional benefits of working core and gaining a stronger core, right? I always like to use that apple analogy. You bite out the middle of an apple, you can easily snap that apart. But then two, break down what everyone's always chasing, visible ads. So one, let's talk about the functionality of the core and why it's important to have a strong core.
Well, the core is the powerhouse of your body, right? It's like plain and simple. It is where movement stems from. It's where proper movement stems from, or should. It is, when we define the core, the easiest way to, without going into like an hour-long dissertation of what your core, like it's everything but your limbs, essentially. So I think, we throw the word core around so loosely as trainers. And again, I think there's so many people out there who don't understand what that means. They think core, they just think abs, like immediately. They're like, and we toy with even just saying, like, I hate just saying the word abs. Like, it's very hard for me as a trainer to just say abs, because I truly am always talking about your core when I'm talking about your abs, right? Or when we're working your abs. So important to know that essentially, aside from your arms and your legs, the core includes everything up to the insertion of your lat muscle, right? All the way down through your glutes. So your pelvic lumbo complex, that whole complex is part of your core. So training your core, one thing it is not is just doing crunches and just working your abs and time under tension abdominal work. And it's not just even just doing a plank, right? So I think plank is what people think when you say, what's the best core exercise? They immediately go plank. Not saying it isn't, it's a wonderful one. But I always say within training your core, I call it the core 4 movements. And with a bonus, there's 5. I just like core 4 rhymes.
Sounds nice.
But so it sounds really good, right? The first and most important thing is learning how to truly engage and activate your core. And I think that's like the hardest part, is really understanding not only the breath work that goes into training your core, but just the position of your pelvis in relation to your rib cage, in relation to your glutes, all of it. And there's so much information out there about it, but in the easiest way to explain it is one of the moves in the core 4, which is tabletop resistance. It's what I always start people with. So really simply, if you lay on your back, right, and you bring your knees over your hips, and so you have a 90-degree angle between your shin and your hamstring, feet are flexed. You want to feel in that position that your low back is anchored on the ground, right? So we often talk about doing a posterior pelvic tilt, like that posterior pelvic tilt. And the reason we say that is because the natural position for most people when they lay down is that they're going to have space between their low back and the floor, right? They have a little lordosis, which is the curvature of the spine, the lumbar spine, right? So we have a natural lordosis. And in order to alleviate that space, you have to do a slight tuck to the tailbone, right? That tuck often gets exaggerated. So what we're really meaning is like a neutral spine, right, is what we're looking for. And I think when you say tuck, I think as a trainer, we say tuck, and we tuck and draw in, and we show that. And then people start to feel like they got to walk around like tucked, right? They're like, well, but wait, I'm like tucking, I'm squeezing. It's a horrible position.
This is where I live now.
This is where I live. Like, you see, and I'm always saying this to guys, I'm like, I don't want to just see you walking around town like this. Like, this is not, like, life doesn't sit here, right? This is just giving you, this is an exaggerated example to help you learn to engage your core. So I think it's important to remember that like, sometimes you'll hear trainers talk, and just with a grain of salt, take it with a grain of salt, that you want to tuck and draw in to the point where your low back is anchored on the ground, but not that horrible, like, over, that nobody would want to see. Like, it's horrible posture because it creates a rounding of the shoulders as well. But when you're laying down, that slight tuck to the tailbone, and then you place your hands on your quads, and you drive your quads into your hands, and at the same time, you are pressing away. So you're creating massive resistance in your entire abdominal wall, right? By driving those quads toward you, pressing the quads away at the same time, low back is anchored down, and your ribs are wrapped. And that's a confusing term to people sometimes. So when you say ribs wrapped, all that means is that a rib flare. This is a rib flare where I'm standing and I'm like chest out and I'm arching my back, right? But to wrap the ribs, you do that slight tuck and draw in. It's like knitting your ribs in. It's like going like this, right? And you hold that for 10 seconds and you just push. And that's where you're really going to feel. That's the first step I always have people do for activating their core, for really feeling what's going on. And it takes time. It is not easy. When someone says engage your core, 90% of people are like, I have no idea what that means. Like, what is that? Like, so that's the best way I can describe it. Like, I feel like that gives you the best connection from there. So that's like the first core move of the core 4. Then dead bug. I'll dead bug all day.
Love our dead bugs.
Love a dead bug. Love all variations of a dead bug. They are so important, right? But the biggest, what you need to do with the dead bug, and the biggest mistake, is that people just pass through that movement, like we talked about before, not connecting your mind to your muscle. So when you extend opposite arm and leg, and it's great to do dead bug after tabletop resistance, because then you're set up knees over hips, right? You go into dead bug, extending opposite arm and leg parallel to the ground, low back anchored down. You got to hold that. When you extend the arm and the leg, you give at least a 2-second hold so that your body can connect, your mind can connect to your core. This is the form I'm talking about. There is such a massive difference between passing through movement and truly engaging your muscle. You have got to give your muscle time to engage and sit in that moment so it knows what's going on. If you just move and move and move and move, it doesn't have the time to create that neural pathway to truly connect and make a difference.
Yeah, it becomes more of a hip flexor and a shoulder exercise at that point.
I don't feel this in my core. I feel my hip flexor in my shoulder, and it's like, and we see it all the time, right? So getting people to slow down, and this isn't just for core work, but in general, slower movement in general is much harder than moving faster, to be honest. It forces you to engage and try it. Like, if you're someone that's always moved fast, I hate to use men as an example, but if you ever watch men do push-ups, like if you just say dropping me 10, it's fast.
They're going army range.
And they're not. Yeah, their chest isn't even near the ground. They're going like the bend is like this. We're probably losing half the listeners right now, but it's true.
They're like, that's it, I'm out.
They're right. So if you ask them to slow, I do this with my husband, and I'm like, slow it down. And he's like, that's harder. I'm like,
yeah.
Yes, it is.
Get that full range of motion. Focus on that core. Absolutely.
I'm like, it's not just get it done. It's like, let's do it right. So
do 5 reps there versus 50.
50, exactly. Right. So with dead bug, 2-second hold with the extension of the arm and leg to give your body a chance to feel. But also, as you have that extension, you have to squeeze the glute of the extended leg and squeeze the quad. So it's not just letting the leg fly out and extend. It's you've got to extend and squeeze. Like, think about what you're doing, right? And low back is anchored down. You do 10 of those each side after tabletop resistance. And then you've got a really great connection with your core. And it may seem, simple, or it may seem boring, but I never go a day without those moves. Right? And then I flip over and I do bird dog. And what is bird dog? Bird dog is exactly a dead bug, right? But you're in a prone position. So dead bug, you're in a supine position, which means you're upright. Prone means you're looking at the ground, right? So in a dead bug, again, man, you see people just arm and legs just flailing, right? Squeeze the glute of the extended leg, right? Feel the extension in the arm. And when you extend, right, you're working on glute engagement, shoulder extension. As you draw the elbow to the knee, because I love a bird dog crunch so much, that's when you feel your abdominals, right? So much of engaging your core is taking the time to really, really, really feel the connection. And and not only in the moment, but it also takes a period of time to even develop that core stability. Because it's not just strength. Like, you've got to develop the stability before you develop the strength.
So we've got our activation, we've got our dead bugs, we've got our bird dogs. What's number 4?
So number 4 is a plank.
Love it.
So
let's bring it all together.
Let's bring it all together, right? So the plank, and you can do an elbow plank or you can do an extended arm plank. I personally feel an elbow plank more. That's just me.
We're talking forearm plank.
Forearm plank, yeah. So on your elbows. So I feel when I'm on my hands, I tend to start to feel my shoulders more than my core. If I lower the lever and go to the elbows, now it depends on the person. So that's another thing. Like, it really is a personal. Like, I'll train clients. They'll be like, I feel it so much more in my hands. I'm like, great. So that's your plank. That's your challenging plank, right? Some people feel their core more in a bear plank than they do an extended leg plank. So, there are so many variations within, that can make a plank, I guess, more exciting. But sometimes just holding a basic plank, sometimes doing like knee taps, that's just a distraction. Yeah. Oftentimes, like, it's so much harder just to hold a solid plank because you're also staying deep in your thoughts.
Right. You get down to that forearm plank, you think about driving your elbows to your toes and your toes to your elbow, and you create that transverse activation. You're going to be shaking within 10 seconds. You're going to be there. Let alone, you see some people in the not so perfect form that you mentioned, they're like, I can hold it for a minute.
Forever.
You're like, well, let's tweak a few things and let's see when you start, shaking here.
Yeah.
I think it's important too when we talk about functionality for core. Yes, these are all things to build a strong core. And we said posterior chains involved here. We're talking about obliques. We're talking about that 360-degree view of your core. This is going to help with injury prevention. It's going to help with muscle imbalances. It's going to help with pain that you're feeling. 90% of the people that I talk to who are complaining of back pain get a stronger core.
Absolutely.
Do you know how many, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole too much, but how many people complain of chronic lower back pain and they're debating surgery? Oh, yeah. And it's like, no, hold on. Let's get a core circuit going for you every single day and talk to me in 3 weeks, right? Yeah,
it is. So 90% of people will have low back pain at some point in their life. 100%. Or not 90%, as I said. So as you just spoke to, the number one cause is a weak core. Like, it is not, surgery is always a last resort to me. But, I can tell you, sometimes you learn the most when you have an injury, right? As a trainer, especially, because you can hear someone say, in my younger years, the number of people that come and say, "Oh, I've got low back pain," and I'm like, yeah. Everybody has low back pain. Well, I myself experienced low back issues when I ran a half marathon in Aspen, got on a plane, no stretching. This is when I was 40. Did not stretch, didn't FOMO, nothing. Just jumped right back on the plane to come home. Got back to New York, couldn't stand up. Went to get out of the seat of the plane, and I was like, I can't stand up. So L5S1, so herniated disc in my back, but to the point, I couldn't stand up straight. I suddenly realized what people meant when they said they had low back pain. I was like, this is excruciating. I can't walk. And through that, I always knew the importance of core. Obviously, I was 40 at that point. I've always been such an advocate of a stronger core, and clearly I have one, right? But what I was not focusing on enough was the glute med. So I was so focused on yes, the rotation, the anti-rotation, all of this. But the glute medius is partially responsible for stabilizing your low back.
That pesky glute med. And guys, look up glute med on Google. You will see how small but how mighty the stabilizer muscle
and mighty.
is.
Yeah. And when I started, again, bands, right? Put the band above my knees, be on the ground doing bridges, pressing out on the band. When I started incorporating clamshells, all of these things that, I do them, but not diligently enough. When I started really focusing more on the glute med and learning more, deeper dive into what, as you said, small but mighty, what the impact it can have on your body, I haven't had low back pain since. That was once you have, everybody has herniated discs. It's whether they decide to present themselves throughout the course of your life.
Sure.
Well, since that time, I haven't had that again, thank God. I was so, and now with my clients, it helped me with my clients, because then I became more focused on work with them on the glute med. And you can see it on the app. Like, we do so much glute med, and the number of people, there's nothing more refreshing than people emailing you and saying, oh my gosh, since I started, I always had low back pain. I didn't think I could run again. I didn't think I could, every time I get off a bike, I couldn't stand up straight. Started doing your workouts and focusing on the glute med and all this, and I zero back pain now. And so, you learn a lot through injury. And I think sometimes it can be super helpful, super frustrating, but that's oftentimes when you gain your most insight as a coach or a trainer. And it almost makes you look back on the time before you were injured and go, wow, I wish I could take, have that time back to know this.
Yeah.
But it's like your mom. Your mom can say it to you till you're blue in the face, right? Tell you something till you're blue in the face, but until you actually experience it yourself, you're
eating the words, right?
Right. So your core, I can't stress enough, and longevity wise, as we age, the first thing that starts to, when you see someone walking down the street and they're rounded forward, right? And you're like, my husband said it before, he's like, how do people get like that? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, because of not focusing on their core when they were younger. Right. If you don't develop that strength, that pillar strength, down the road, it can be really detrimental.
Right. And a lot of them are walking around, they don't even know. And that's the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's so impactful about this work, that we're all talking about here. And, I think predominantly when you're experiencing pain in a part of your body, I think it's important to take inventory in the areas above and below it too. Yeah. So if your lower back is screaming at you the second you get out of bed, well, let's look at those hips. Let's look at that thoracic spine. Let's take a look and let's see how we can make things better. I think all of that is super important, but let's talk about getting the core that everybody let's talk about the six-pack abs, right? So we all hear the expression abs are made in the kitchen, but
that's not my quote.
Let's debunk it. Yeah, let's talk about it.
So my quote is, abs are made in the gym, revealed in the kitchen.
Love that.
Because it's the honest truth, right? You can't tell, you're not going to get abs by eating salad. It's a muscle. Your abdominal wall, your core, there's muscle there. Everybody has that muscle. You couldn't get out of bed in the morning if you didn't have abdominal muscles. Now, it's the fat over the muscles that people are like, oh, no, I don't have any abs. I don't have any abs. I'm like, you do. You absolutely do.
They're in there.
They're in there. There's just, visceral fat or whatever on top. But now, and that's also genetic. Where you hold fat and we need fat on our stomach. You can't just, it's not, I will say I am genetically blessed too. I have had abs since I was 5, and my dad has abs. He's 84, so, but I've also worked really hard on it, because that was an area for me that was like, oh, abs are kind of my thing, abs and triceps. Well, I'm going to make them my thing by being the best I possibly can in that area, in understanding the core and what makes them, why I have them like this, right? So when you train your core, we talked about the core 4, but it's not just that. It's not you can't just do those 4 moves and be like, oh, I'm going to get abs from this. You have to train your core like every other muscle group, right? So it's working rotational work into your routine. It's doing carries, right? So and different kinds of carries, whether it's a suitcase carry, whether it's a loaded or unloaded, you've got an unstable load, you've got you're doing a high carry and a low carry. Rotational, anti-rotational work. Your core is such an intricate, there are so many layers, right? And it really takes time. Anti-rotational work, Palloff press, so freaking important. But then rotational work is important as well. Don't discount the time under tension work, right? So that gets a bad name now. Crunches or any kind of work where you're laying on the ground and working your abs. You still have to do it. People may, they disagree with me. I firmly believe that as much as you need the functional training in your core that we do, and we do carries and all the other things I just listed, you also still have to hone on them time and attention wise. I believe that with every muscle group. That's why I have a fine tuning section on my app, because after you work in a broad manner, you then need to give it that 5 minutes of really deep attention afterwards to really finish it off, right? So no one's saying you have to spend 20 minutes a day on the ground doing abs, but you've got to get to that point where you feel, burn isn't a sensation that it doesn't mean it's a good workout, right? But it does mean that fatigue is starting to set in. You need to fatigue your abdominals like you do any other muscle group. does that mean you can work your abs every day? Because you hear a mix of that. Like abs can be done every day because they're an endurance muscle. They could be, but they shouldn't be. They should be given proper rest, just like every other muscle group. So if you have and this is reminding everyone that every movement you do uses your core. So your core is getting a workout every single day, because when you squat or you deadlift or you row or the only things that maybe might not work your core, I mean, it still should be engaged if you're in proper position on a bench, but like a tricep extension. But if you have your knees bent, feet on the bench, and you're tucking, right, and you're drawing in, you're still working your core. So there's really no way around working your core every day, but that actual honing in on it, you do need to give time for your abdominals to rebuild and get stronger. As far as seeing them, there are so many factors there. It could be another hour here, but genetics is one factor. Obviously, how you fuel your body is a big factor. You know, there are a few things you can do, like cut down on your sodium, making sure, like, it's a muscle group, right? So you've got to make sure that your protein intake is high. Sitting in a calorie deficit, you know, calories in, calories out. But even then, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to see your abs. It really is something that depends on the person. It really does. And your stage of life.
Absolutely. You know, and if your number one goal in your life right now is to be able to see those abs, okay.
You need to find another goal.
Yeah. Like,
but I mean, I get it that people want to see, like, and listen, I love having it. Like, I'm not going to say I don't like, sure, I love being able to see them. And easy for me to say, like, find another goal, you know, because I have them. Sure. Right. But I will say, like, there are so many more important things to be focused on. Because you can see a six-pack doesn't even mean that it's a strong core.
Well, and if, you know, for example, one of the tidbits you said, if that means cutting down on sodium for you, because that's not applicable for everyone, well, then what if your body needs that sodium?
Right.
Because you're working out so hard and you're sweating, and you're someone who loses a lot of sodium in their sweat.
Exactly.
Now you're going to feel shitty.
Right.
But you're getting those abs.
Right.
You know, so, like, I mean, if you want to make the sacrifices, that's ultimately your call. But just know, I mean, there's a lot of other things that are going to have to go into it.
There's a lot of other things. And you may also be surprised by just changing other things in your training, right? Yeah. Like adding in those more explosive movements, or adding in, maybe you have 2 days of HIIT, like you add in a little bit of running, like you're doing a little more zone 2 cardio. A lot of, you know, if you've just been lifting straight heavy and you've discounted the cardio, as we talked about earlier, you just haven't been doing it, you add some really specific focused cardio in there, you may start to see the abs. Or if you've only been doing cardio, which I hope isn't the case, and you start strength training, you know, a lot of people start seeing more visible abs when they start, like, squatting heavier or deadlifting. Right. You know, there are other factors. It's not just
because of the bracing factor when it comes to heavy lifting. But I think, you know, people look at it a little too black and white. I think, you know, if I do nothing but running, I'm going to have a six-pack. But, you know, if you're lifting heavy, you're going to have a strong core. Yes. I think a lot of people, you know, misunderstand in the sense, like, if you can't see someone's abs, they don't have a strong core.
Right.
Look at some of the most impressive power lifters in the world, or strongmans. They have some of the strongest cores. Mm-hmm. Now, does it visibly, maybe, quote unquote, not look like it? Sure.
Right.
But their ability to brace, their ability to put 500 plus pounds, 600, 700 pounds on their back and squat that's a lot of core.
You can't do that if you don't have a strong
Correct.
core.
Right. And, you know, same for running. I think people underestimate running. I mean, running's going to help your core a ton. Just that slight rotation that you're getting. Yes, to the fact that you're pushing yourself harder, but the actual movement of running is going to help your core quite a bit as well.
Absolutely. So I think we also need to, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think we also, what I hear sometimes that, to me, you know, it goes both ways. I've also heard people say, on different, you know, not on this podcast, but on different podcasts, like, if you see someone with visible abs, they're not healthy. And I don't think it's fair to say that either. It's 100% not fair to say that. We always need to remember that everybody's body is their body and different, right? And you can't judge just by what you see. Like, you don't know what, like I said, I've had abs since I was 5. So when someone says to me, oh, she's always had abs, she must be starving herself. What?
Right.
Like, like, this is, like, I could show when someone, it's interesting because people say, like, can we see your before and after picture? I'm like, I don't have before and after pictures. This is consistency. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't have that, like, you know, I don't have that story of I was this and now I'm this. I've been consistently this, which I think says a lot since I was, you know, like 15.
Right.
I've always been this way. I've always been, you know, when someone says, oh, you look the same as you did 10 years ago. Yeah, to me, that's a compliment. It means your
Absolutely.
method works, and it means that what you're doing works, and you're consistent, and you're doing what's right for your body, that you're able to, you can maintain this because you're fueling your body properly and you're working your body properly.
Right.
So I think we just all need to, you know, it's obvious, but sometimes not, because you hear it all the time where people are like, oh, but if you don't have abs, you don't have a strong core. If you have abs, you're not healthy. It's like, come on.
You gotta find what works for you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think almost every topic, every guest that we have on
Absolutely.
here, at the end of every conversation, it always ends with, well, no one body is the same, and you have to figure out the right formula and the right equation that works best for you personally, based off where you are in your life, based off of what your goals are, your own genetics. You and I sitting across from each other are extremely different, right? So we have to find out what works for us in the kitchen, in the gym. You have to find out how much rest you need. I'm finding that I need more rest days than I did when I was 20, and that's okay.
Wait till you're 49.
And I'm looking, you know, but like I look and I feel better than I did when I was 20, right? So, you know, you just have to adapt, and you have to, you know, have some patience.
You have to be willing
yourself.
to, as I always say, like I'm constantly saying this, when people ask like how my business has evolved or how my method has evolved, I'll say you have to be willing to evolve with the times, not necessarily change, but evolve, right? So you don't change your core values. You don't change like who you are as a person or what you believe or what you know to be true, but you're willing to evolve the style that you have, or, you know, who you are as a person, or what feels better at that point in your life. Like you have to be willing to evolve, because we never stay the same. We're creatures that are constantly changing. That's a beautiful thing. But instead of saying constantly changing, say constantly evolving, because you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining wisdom, right? It's a gift to be able to continuously evolve as time goes on.
I love that. Kira, let's head into our final topic for today, and that's movement and menopause. Now, listen, we've only got a little bit left in the studio today, so if we need to come back and do a part 2, we might have to. But, you know, there's a giant misconception that women should decrease the amount of plyometrics and running and, you know, all of these movement patterns as they age. But I want to spend some time busting a few myths here. So first, let's start by addressing the changes that the female body goes through in menopause. You know, hormones may decline, energy systems can shift and be impacted, but how does emphasizing an impactful fitness routine potentially negate the negative effects that some women face?
Yeah, so there are so many. It's such an important topic, right? And I think, thankfully, we're starting to talk about it more. I especially am starting to talk about it more because I'm 49 years old, right? Whether you're in perimenopause or menopause, whatever it is, like everybody's going to experience these changes. Like you can't get out without it, right? Like
there's no hiding from it.
There's no hiding from it. It happens to everyone. So, you know, one of the key benefits to exercise, no matter where you are in life, but especially going through this phase, like you may feel like your emotions, or that you're on a bit of a roller coaster emotionally, right? Like mood swings is one of the unfortunate side effects of perimenopause and menopause. So what does exercise do? Well, it makes you feel better, like immediately. Even just 10 minutes of moving your body is going to make you feel better. And I think it's almost like taking it back to when you were a beginner in fitness, where it was just really hard to start. And I think it's that same feeling that women, you know, late 40s, whatever age you may be, 50, start to feel that they just like can't get themselves going, right? And you just have to remember, like, nobody can make you do that but yourself. But if you just give yourself 10 minutes of simple movement, it's probably going to lead to 20 or 30. So just start. Like, even if it's just getting outside and starting walking, you might start to walk and go, you know what, I actually feel like I could jog now. Or I actually feel like I could go home and I actually want to lift some weights. So I think mentally, it's really important not to just sink back into that mentality of like, I'm just not going to do it today because I'm not in the mood.
I always say physically set a timer for 5 minutes, and it may not be your day, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But at least you made that effort.
Yeah.
But I would say, 90% of the time, to your point, that 5 minutes, and you're like, nope, another 5.
Exactly.
No, another 5, and you build
amazing.
off of that.
It's amazing. Like, I always say that energy breeds energy, right? You're an energy maker. So motion is lotion, right? If you're just going to sit, like, what's that going to do? It snowballs. Right? It snowballs. You sit a little more, and before you know it, you're like laying on the couch watching Netflix. If you could just like shift your mindset and be like, you know what, I'm just going to start, and then it will lead to more. And I think women going through this phase of life, you become like hyper aware of everything. Like any little thing, you wake up, you feel bloated, you're like, oh no, am I getting like a menopause belly? Like what? Like no, you're just bloated because you ate something last night. Like I think we can also overthink it a little bit and be like, yes, your body's going to change. And there are things you need to do to combat that, or you can do that can help with that. But also, becoming hypersensitive about it can also be a negative, like anything in life, right? If you start to like zone in on it too much, you start to stress about it too much, right? So continuing to exercise, but also, I get a lot of messages where women will say, well, I'm 50, so I can't jump now. Who told you couldn't jump at 50? Like, where is this coming from? Because you hit 50, like, it's over. Like, there's no more.
They're going to come and get me if I jump one time, right?
Yeah, it's like this misconception. So what happens in your 40s and 50s, what becomes really important training-wise is strength training, right? We are trying to, if you're not strength training properly, as we talked about earlier, lifting in a way that is really stimulating your muscle, right? Increasing the integrity of the muscle. And that can come in various ways. It's lifting heavy. It's maybe it's spending more time in a movement. Maybe you're doing pulses within a squat. It's tempo training, right? There's other ways to challenge the muscle besides just lifting heavy, right? So finding all those different ways and finding the way that works best for your body is really important. But we're trying to hold on, and it is possible to gain more muscle as long as you're fueling your body properly and you're doing the proper workouts, gain more muscle as you get into your 40s and 50s and get into that phase of life that is menopause. But you have to be willing to put the work in. You can't just grab a 2-pound dumbbell and assume like, okay, this is fine. This is going to keep my muscle mass on target. You lose between 3 and 10% of your muscle mass every decade if you're not challenging your muscle enough. That's scary. That should scare you. It should scare you to the point that you want to pick up weights, right? That you want to pick up a band more, that you want to incorporate more strength training into your routine. But explosive power, that is an area that, as I said, I get messages all the time. I can't jump anymore. I don't want to jump anymore. And when I say why, I don't get an answer back, because there is no why. They're just thinking that they're too old to do it.
Well, I think a lot of them are afraid. I love that we're starting to see more women in their 50s and 60s continuing to pick up weights, or maybe even picking up weights for the very first time. They are afraid to jump. They are afraid to continue running. They think that's going to break a bone, cause a stress fracture.
They think it's doing the opposite of what it's actually doing to your bone density. So people have the misconception that jumping, yes, it creates stress on your joints, right? But so does lifting weights. Like, anything that's like good for your body, honestly, creates stress on your joints and on the muscle tissue.
Temporary stress for
long-term success. Yes. So that's like the best quote to remember. Temporary stress for long-term success. You want your bone density you want to be focused on it. You want to increase your bone density. And the only way to do that is to create stress on your joints and your muscles, right? So explosive training is actually challenging your muscle and the genes within in a different way. Like part of the muscle that's likely been asleep for quite some time is now going to be stimulated by this explosive movement. And I think the misconception is also people think explosive, they think they're doing box jumps.
Right.
It's got to be box jumps. It's got to be explosive movement can be as simple as standing up and just bouncing on your toes. Like, that's where I tell a client to start if they're in their 50s and they're like, what do you mean explosive training? It's like, well, just bounce on your toes for a bit and then sit into a squat. Bounce on your toes, sit into a squat, right? Or get up on a step and stand on the step and then jump off it, land in the squat. So you're working on the deceleration, right? And you're working on controlling the explosive movement on the way down. Then you turn around and you jump up, right? So there are ways to progress it. The most important thing is if you're just starting to incorporate explosive training, is like anything else, start with the proper progression and learn the proper form, because that's what's going to, again, make you turned off from it. If you start doing, box jumps and you're like, oh, now my knees are killing me. Well, you didn't start with the proper progression. Give yourself 2 to 3 weeks of just bouncing on the toes. Jumping rope is an incredible explosive movement, but done low impact if you're doing it correctly, right? Because you're not landing like you're trying to, kill an insect. You're landing like you're trying to land on glass as you're jumping. But so many studies have shown that even incorporating jumping rope like twice a week for 3 to 5 minutes at a time can have a huge impact on your bone density. I have an entire section on my app that's jump rope, and the number of women who first download the app will email me and go, I can't jump rope. I'm 45. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why there is an age limit to jumping rope or jumping in. Like, we need to completely shift that mindset.
Yeah, we've got to reset it for sure. Yeah. It needs to be talked about it more, and people need to, be educated on it more. I think the deceleration drill is probably one of my favorites for that age, right? Because you are getting, and this is not for the 45 or 50, but as you get into those 70s and 80s, right? You should know how to land. You should know how to catch yourself.
God forbid you trip off a step or something, and you're like, you don't want to land on your face. You want to land on your feet. Right.
So, you're in a better position for, in long term, understanding how to stick that landing, and maybe the slight chance of, if you're doing it too much too quickly, developing something like stress fracture, again, if you're progressing properly, that likelihood decreases significantly. But again, would you prefer to add that in a couple of times, or would you prefer to, God forbid, like you said, something happened, and now they say 73%, once they experience that first fall, it kind of is downhill from there, right? So I think it's inherently becoming more and more important. I've had this discussion with E for men, right? And it's equally as important for men. You need to be emphasizing these things more so when you get to this point in your life than you did in your 20s.
Absolutely. In your 20s, your 20s, like you could basically do anything. Like, you are just, and it's all, hypertrophy, like you're working, like, and you're still, listen, I still love training for that. Like, I love to lift. I love to lift for that with, but again, like, I get such a kick out of when I see, like, I just turned 30 and I'm in the best shape of my life. Let me show you how on Instagram. And I'm like, 30. Oh, like, you could really just choose any movement pattern and you'd be fine. Like, it's kind of fun. But when you see someone who's 49 and in the best shape of their life, you're like, I want to know what you're doing to get to that point. And what I'm doing, and what I encourage my clients and my athletes who use the app to do, is like, you have to focus. Like, it's so, like, I guess the strength training, but the not being afraid of the things that seem like they have an expiration date on them. Yeah. Right? Like the jumping, like the like I just came out with a Stokes step, right? And people think step aerobics. Well, yeah, like we do some really cute like Stokes step sport with it. But really the purpose of coming out with that Stokes step was to make sure we could do up and overs with it, that we could do weighted step ups with it in a proper way, that you could sit on it, explode up off it, right? So it was like another tool so that I could ensure that people were doing the proper explosive training in the proper progression, so they are doing the right things for their body. Like, your greatest defense against aging is muscle.
Muscle is medicine.
Muscle is medicine. The more muscle you have in your body, no matter what age you are, what decade you're in, the more you burn in a resting state. It's that simple.
I want to start seeing more 60 and 70-year-old hybrid athletes here. I want to start seeing those age groups over in DECA and High Rocks, and we see them in marathons. We see, I've done Ironman. I've done a couple Ironmans, and I've got this 85-year-old guy cranking it out, and I'm like, wow, like it's just so impressive. But I want to see them doing everything, right? I want to see them jumping and running and lifting and I really playing basketball.
I think we will, because people are starting to understand, like, you can't be afraid of it. Like, you can't be afraid of movement. Like, there's really no movement that you should stop doing as you get older. Like, the focus within changes, right? Like, we're doing more, like, mobility. Like, truth be told, yes, obviously, like, I added the Stokes Body Shop category on the app, right, which are 10-minute mobility sequences that you do, because I knew that I needed more mobility. I'm like, if I need it, other people do. And people are like, oh, yes, focus more on, you need more mobility after 40, after 50. Well, no, you also need it in your 20s. Like, I get kind of a kick out of it, because I'm like, well, the 20s lay the foundation for every other decade, right? Your 20s, your 30s, every decade before the one you're in lays the foundation for the one that comes after it, right? So I wish I did more mobility work in my 20s and 30s. So yes, I think it's important we do it in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, but it's equally important to do it in your, people want the magic pill and they want to hear this is all you need to do and this is the exact decade you should be doing it in.
Here's the formula.
Truth be told, like, the formula is, like, you need a little bit of everything no matter what decade you're in.
Absolutely. And I think, to your point, it's not about doing less things as you get older. I think it's also about implementing the correct rest.
It's about doing them smarter.
Correct. And using that wisdom from the decades before and applying it. I know I have a guy who he's about 55 years old, and he goes heli skiing, and he does all these phenomenal things that he's so lucky, to have access to.
Yeah.
Injured every other month, broken finger, torn hip labrum, torn rotator cuff, excuse me. When we got him into the point of listening to his body and making better habits outside of the gym, decreasing alcohol, getting better sleep, taking the proper rest days,
hydration,
getting better mobility, drinking more water, his life is completely different now, and he still does all of those things with less injury.
Isn't it amazing? Mm-hmm. It's like, so it really all comes back to what we started the conversation in, which is like form, whether it doesn't matter what activity you're doing, right? But really connecting your mind to your body, no matter what age you are, is so incredibly important, because if we don't continue to do that, and if we're not taught to do that kind of innately, if it doesn't become a consistent habit, when you reach that, 80, when you're 80 or you're 90, like, and you can't, to not have that connection to your body is so detrimental, because you end up not even be able to get out of a chair, right? Because you don't know, it's the strength, but it's also the fact that you can't connect to yourself, right? Yep. So it's all, we're all thinking long game in mind, and it just becomes more, I think about it more now than I for sure did 10 years ago. As you gain more wisdom, you're like, wow, I need to, I'm thinking 10 years from now versus just tomorrow. Yeah.
Absolutely. Kira, we're headed, and when this debuts, I think it's going to be shortly before Christmas. We are in the thick of the holiday season. With the holiday season comes January. We all like the saying, New Year, New You. Well, let's be a little realistic, and let's focus on optimizing and getting a little bit better in 2024. But also there are, this is the time of year where a lot of people say, this is my year. This is the year I'm going to get started. And that's whether they're 18 or 64. So, what's a piece of advice or a piece of wisdom that you can give to those people who, like we said in the beginning, they don't even know where to start. Maybe they're intimidated to go to the gym, to go into that class. What's one piece that you want to leave them with?
I think, what's so important to me, my method and my community, and I found that it resonates with everyone, is being grateful for the ability to move and challenge your body, because it's a gift. And if we can remember that it's not a given, right, that you're going to be able to do that. It is truly a gift. That alone will spur you on to just start. And you're stronger than your excuses. You can come up with a million of them. Everyone can. But truth be told, like, you are stronger than them. And it has to come from, so much of it, like, you can, my app's there for you. There's a million options on there. There's 380 different workouts, but you're the only person that can push play. And so you have to take some pride in that, the ability you have to control your destiny, essentially, to control your own health. You have to really want it, and people will be there to guide you, but it really has to come from within you. So, I always say you get to, you don't have to. And I think that's such an important thing to remember every day when you go to either step in the gym or just get outside for a run or whatever it is that's starting you on your journey. It truly is a gift to be able to move your body. So, and moving your body well. So take the time to do a little research, right? And do your due diligence on whatever program it is that you decide that you want to be a part of. Find something that you love, as I said, that really resonates with you, and make sure that that stays a part of your routine. But it is important that you are taught properly. So, I think that you're investing in your health. Right? There's no greater investment, and you're investing in your longevity. So whatever it takes to help you get to that point that you're doing that the right way is a worthy investment.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, if you're going to invest in anything this holiday season and in 2024, put it towards your health. Yeah. It's the best return that you're going to see, and on the spend that you're putting out there. Hire a coach, hire a trainer, get the app, get the proper resources in place. Googling can only go so far. Right. So get somebody who can work with you. Find someone who can really cater to your needs and help you understand how to get your fitness journey started. Kira, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell the audience how they can follow along and get in touch, and maybe even take a class in real life with you.
Yeah, so Kira Stokes Fit on Instagram. That's my Instagram. As Danielle said, Kira Stokes Fit app will give you everything you need. There's all the Kira Stokes gear, the fit gear. So I have a whole product line that goes along with the app, and then KSFIT Fuel, perfect time, January 1st. You're going to get your fitness and your fueling right in check. And then in terms of classes, hopefully coming back to more regular classes in New York City after January, but definitely events coming up. So everything I put, I'm such an Instagram girl. I'm not really a TikTok person, I'll be honest. I try, it's not my thing. But everything would be right there if you follow me along on there. You'll hear all the details, what's coming up.
Great. Thanks again, Kira.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode here at Bodybuilding.com. Stay tuned for more stories along the way.